Hey everyone, welcome back to Crypto Cash. Thanks again for joining me here. Hope you're having a phenomenal day. Obviously, taking a look here at this crazy price action from Bitcoin, that nice fundamental catalyst from yesterday, and the tentative sell-off here that we're seeing with this invalidation on this lower time frame pattern. I'll talk more about that if you're curious. That was available on my X and or Twitter. Sorry, no. Twitter is X, also Telegram. It's all available there if you're kind of curious about the details. We're going to be paying attention today to an unusual movement history, as well as Coinbase Premium Index, kind of what that suggests here for us with US markets, essentially the premium being lower than the rest of the market. And obviously these sell order, well, the specific one sell order coming through after so many buy orders, right? I don't think it's going to just take one sell order to push the price down, but this natural capitulation should occur with a tentative pullback here based on the simple fact that we have a lot of order blocks above the price, liquidation below the price, and most upper liquidation has been pretty much swept here, or essentially a lot of those shorts there closed either in profit or effectively stopped out at a loss. Really depends on where they got in, but there was a big pile of late shorts there yesterday, and majority of those have been swept. So all positive stuff here in the sense of a strong likelihood of a tentative pullback here based on the fair value gap below the price. So we're going to talk about that and how altcoins relate to Bitcoin right now. I wouldn't recommend taking a long just yet because it's still a little premature. I think that we are due to correct ourselves a little bit more. And even though there were some positive fundamental catalysts yesterday, crazy stuff is still going on in the world right now. We got to be mindful that that is a relevant factor here too. So let's go and take a closer look. Be sure to stick around. All right, folks, before we jump into the back end data, quick reminder, hit that like button. Deeply appreciate you doing so. Thank you again so much to those of you who are consistent with that. Quick heads up, friendly reminder, I also have a Twitter, Telegram, and Discord, so make sure you reference that as well. Consistent alpha flowing through there. Basically just updates on everything we analyze in our charts here, but also more specifics too. Let's go ahead and touch on the open interest here scenario, just to kind of give us some perspective, because I did send that post out earlier. Some questions were asked, and I just want to kind of clarify that open interest isn't synonymous with price action, but a lot of times it's an indicator or an early indicator that the price is going to continue moving in that same direction. So when we have open interest on the bottom and the price action up top here, the analysis I want to kind of leave here with you is that every time we come into these resistance ranges, 72 to 74K range, we see open interest spike and inevitably pull back. What we need to see is open interest to continue to precipitate higher or progress higher, close above this $18 billion resistance, and allow for the price action to continue further up. It's kind of a momentous scenario there with open interest. When open interest is high, it allows these continuations to run. So with yesterday's price action getting fizzled out, open interest pulling way back, leads me to believe it was, I wouldn't say a false pump, but not really a reliable one. Okay, so just bear that in mind. Also understand it was mostly just based on the way that things are going. There was like a 2-week delay or a ceasefire essentially, and there's still craziness going on in the world right now over in the Iran Israel space. So just be mindful that is present, and that's factoring in. But the big picture here is that until we get higher on open interest, I don't super trust these pumps or this most recent one. Taking a look here as well for unusual movement history. This tells us a lot of kind of just, based on the price action of the relative historical volatility. So in other words, how volatile has Bitcoin been in the recent range? While this only goes back to 2 weeks in this scenario here, this does tell us that in the last 2 weeks, every time we've seen these little pushes, these pumps, they're typically fizzled out quite quickly. Now we are establishing higher highs and higher lows leading into that. So I don't want you to walk away from this analysis bearish by any stretch. I think short-term pullback makes perfect sense. Are we going to see 60K in the next couple weeks? Probably not, unless obviously there's a World War III or something like that happens. Now, obviously, we don't know what that's going to entail, but at this point, this does tell us or suggest that we are overamped, so to speak, and the likelihood of the price pulling back is higher. This gives us a 46% probability of further upside, which essentially is not a strong statistical favorability. Now, let's take a look here at Coinbase Premium Index. I also get a lot of questions on this, and basically the simple way to understand it is that when it flips in the green and stays in the green, it tells us that US markets are buying. That's kind of the best way to translate it. So right now, at this point, we haven't seen that, which is unusual, right? Because you thought that yesterday, the price was pumping during US markets. Truth is, US markets were buying, but it was paled in comparison to the rest of the world, right? So with this premium index staying flat or not breaking that level, leads me to believe that US isn't buying. We're not falling into this trap, so to speak, at least the whales here in the U.S., and they're not buying this pump. And they're more likely selling, right? Or just in general, the rest of the world is buying more so than what we are. So that kind of lets us know that there's less strength in this pump or less sustainability, and the odds of further upside, unless there's a strong fundamental catalyst, is pretty low, or at least lower, right? So that's how I interpret that. If you have your own interpretation of it, of course, go ahead and comment below, but that's the general consensus. Now, when we look at large buy orders, these are $1 million plus positions. In most cases, these big green bubbles, those were like $10 million plus positions. So huge money flowed into Bitcoin yesterday, obviously to pump the price action higher. We are starting to see a little bit of selling pressure here now in the 71K range, and the buying has kind of plateaued. We need the buying to continue for this pump to go any higher because, once again, open interest is low. If open interest remains low, then these pumps don't really mean too much as far as breaking that key level resistance of roughly 72 to 74,000. Looking at order books here, this is an important thing to recognize too, because while you can't really see it too well, I guess you can if you zoom back. You can kind of see over the weekend we saw a lot of order book pressure starting to build below the price, and the price inevitably continued higher. Now it pushed towards 69.70K on its own without any fundamental catalyst. We had a push towards 72.7 today based on that fundamental catalyst from yesterday. So that's kind of an outlier here, but the key takeaway is that we're starting to see more order books pile up between 73 and 75,000, and that's a relevant resistance range to note. Okay, so be mindful of that. Some people do believe that order books are spoofed, which is true. They definitely can be, but I don't think it's a consistent thing. So just bear in mind with order books above the price, that pressure helps us understand there's more resistance than support. In other words, we can go lower faster than we can go higher at this point. All right, having said that, Bitcoin liquidation heat map, if you don't already know this, liquidation is a good gauge of, kind of where the volatility lies. And we can see 66,000 is kind of that lower range there between there and now. We have large little pockets. The main thing I want to reference here is just the last, the 70K to 71K range. That seems like a distinct probability of being hit next, just based on it being closer and larger, okay? You can also see that there's a lot of high leverage at 71,000. So imagine being a $71,000 long position, being in profit at 72.7K, not securing profits, and your profits already cut in half. That's crazy to me, but I'm just more so I think in this market right now, just the way that the market has been, I'm more so just conservative, trying to secure profits whenever possible, instead of trying to let everything ride. So I'll have like larger, quicker movements or larger position sized on smaller, quicker in and out plays versus trying to hold on for dear life and just, feeling stressed out all the time. That's just not healthy. Anyways, the market right now doesn't really give us these breakout opportunities, so it's best not to be a breakout trader. It's highly unsuccessful. Majority of breakout traders are. Having said that, we've seen plenty of breakouts, but they're typically fizzled out quickly. So just be aware of the current market we're in. Having said that, liquidation to the upside is dissipating. We're starting to see less there. We'll look at different charts to see if there's any more on the lower time frames below us, but we've already kind of identified that 7-day time frame tells us we're in a pretty crazy place here with liquidation starting to pile up below the price. Now this is an interesting indicator here. I talked about this in my Twitter post earlier. I did mention that open interest being really high and true retail longs being really low is usually a favorable sign, right? Keep in mind this is a delta. The delta does typically change every 24 hours. I mean, it technically changes a lot faster than that, but every 24 hours, if you look at this here, this would kind of give us that lagging indicator of yesterday's price action. So a lot of times when it says that it's going to go higher in this situation, it's more so, I would say more so a macro move, or more so based on yesterday's delta being so high and yesterday's delta being low and today's being high after that pump. Okay, so bear that in mind. A simple way to understand that and to translate that is that this is usually a favorable sign telling us further upside makes more sense when open interest is high and true retails are low. Okay, you just kind of got to take it with a grain of salt, because the way things moved yesterday, that fundamental catalyst, it totally throws everything off, right? This crazy thing about the world that we're in right now. Actually, one of my VIP traders asked me, how often does the market move like this? I got to say, like 3 or 4 times a year, we're going to see these weird fundamental catalysts that kind of come out of nowhere. Like yesterday should have been terrible news, right? With all the threats in, overseas from Trump, and then all of a sudden the price just pumps because of a ceasefire. That seems kind of crazy and weird to me based on the market conditions, why that happened. But the rest of the world, excluding US markets, view that as favorable, right? So that's generally a favorable sign. That's why the price pumped, and we're here now. So All that being said, from a macro perspective, just so you know, the monthly does indicate we have, let's actually make this a little easier to see. We have a big chunk at 73,200. So I would say that's probably a better case scenario for us. The 7-day time frame also reflects that same number. So the long story short here is if we do end up pumping any further, a rejection in the 73 to 74K range makes the most sense. That's just kind of what I'm leaning more towards. So that's kind of where we're at there for liquidation. As far as open interest is concerned, it's really heavy between 69 to 70K, giving us that gravitational pull towards it, but also likelihood of support. So I'd be careful trying to hold a short through that 69K range. I think there's a distinct probability we at least flatten out there for a little while. I'm expecting Bitcoin to range between 73,000 and 69,000. It would make sense for that range to occur this week, just based on us breaking local high ranges. 69K was that local high, and then of course retesting it as a new low. Liquidation delta is about 8 billion. This is nothing super amazing. It just is what it is. It's down from 12 billion, letting us know the bulls are still in control. Inherently, it's more risky to consider shorting right now, even though we do have a short position open, and we took some nice profits, I think, on that short. Let's go ahead and pull it up for you. And it's just simple as this, right? Like, it's a high risk trade. 22%, quick little in and out, right? That's just kind of the example there, 72,000 to 71,200. So the goal of that trade wasn't to be a greedy person that holds to 60,000. We're trying to get in and out quickly. And that's kind of the narrative that we have right now. We got to be focusing on quicker plays, and holding on for longer periods of time can be inherently a lot more risky. At least it depends on what kind of trader you are and what kind of leverage you're using. If you use too high leverage, it's going to be a problem no matter what. You're using low leverage and higher margin, maybe a different story if you're averaging in correctly. There's different ways to do that. Anyways, taking a look here at the hourly, we're above the Ichimoku cloud. We're seeing consistency here at 70,000. That was a previous range high before the price broke out after a retest. And at this point, it makes sense for us to retest 70,000. I think that's a distinct area of consideration for entry. Am I leaning more towards a long at 70 to 69K? Yes, that's generally my thought process there. It feels weird to want it long at 72,000 or 71.3 at this point. Either way, there's a fair value gap below the price. All the backend data suggests short-term correction lower, makes perfect sense, but we could very well see an unintelligible pump towards that 73.2K range first. Both scenarios exist. This is Schrodinger's Bitcoin. Okay, if it can and will happen, wrong or right, it's going to occur. Right, Bitcoin's both short and long at the same time until you open that and just discover that, hey, we're going to hit both those liquidation ranges at some point or another. All right. Anyways, that's kind of the concept there. If you don't know what Schrodinger's cat is, give that a Google search so you can kind of understand what the reference is there. But either way you look at it, fair value gaps below the price. There's more incentive for a pullback here, I feel, to this 69 to 70K range. It just seems practical at this point. Seeing a pump to the upside right now would be, once again, unintelligible based on the analysis that we have here so far and just the overall state of the world, right? Why would we pump in that situation? I mean, why did we pump yesterday in the first place? That was kind of, once again, irrational, but it happened. Now that we're here, let's use logic and understand that a pullback makes a lot more sense in the short term. Okay? Once again, it all depends on what kind of trader you are. If you're like a long-term macro holder, hold your trade. It's all good. But between now and tomorrow, I do think we're going to see the 69 to 70K range. At least our short currently right now reflects that. Those are my thoughts. What are yours? Comment below. Love to hear it. Let's take a look at some altcoins next. All right, folks, quick look here at Ethereum, kind of seeing what's going on. I need to update some of my charts here, of course, but from yesterday's analysis, just based on the macro structure, we can see there was that local high range of roughly 2170. Just like Bitcoin had that 70K range, there's a distinct probability we see that area retested with that fair value gap still below the price. So that's kind of what I'm leaning more towards on the short term. Just Bitcoin likely pulling back just to those local ranges. That would make the most sense. Again, fair value gap as low as about 2115. Are we going to see that level exactly for Ethereum? Maybe, maybe not. I think it really just depends on Bitcoin, but for the most part, ETH is still generally construed as a strong coin right now. So I would be careful trying to short against it, even though the likelihood of further downside is higher since it actually took off a lot faster than most other alts. So I know it seems kind of contradictory. It's like, wait, Cash, you tell me we're going to go up and down at the same time? Yeah, that's literally the market that we're in right now. These fundamental catalysts cause a lot of irrational market behavior, okay? Having said that, open interest is heavy at 2070 and 2140. Sorry, 2170 and 2140. Those are two areas there of potential support. Liquidation long delta hasn't faltered. Actually, let's get a refresh here. Just double check. It is pulling back to about 8 billion, similar in a lot of ways to Bitcoin. In fact, the price action looks almost identical to Bitcoin's. There is some liquidation left above the price. So just kind of give you some perspective, we can see 2350 would be a better case scenario on this lower time frame pump. 2450 is a pretty low likelihood of getting that hit, which is exactly why the low leverage shorts feel safe with that liquidation event. So I totally get that, but keep in mind locally 2300 might be the next potential pit stop there for Ethereum. That's going to require Bitcoin to pump towards 74,000 though. Please understand that. Okay, all that said, what are we looking at here on the 4 hour? Let's quickly identify this and just kind of understand where we're at. Let's go ahead and open up, so here, pull up our SMAs and just quickly identify the, once more, fair value gap as low as 2115. We look at the 4 hour time frame. We are back under 70 on the RSI, generally a good sign to consider securing profits if you're in a long, because the likelihood of pullback is higher, kind of letting those RSIs reset. And as long as we remain above 50, we're still in pretty decent shape. So once more, a pivot off this level or a potential bounce off the 2170 range is making a lot of sense to me tentatively right now. Okay, I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to wait for Bitcoin to hopefully hit that lower 70K range first. If that happens and we're still hanging out at 2170, I think a long for Ethereum there makes perfect sense. It would be a standard bullish backtest of a previous resistance range, which is common. It's extremely common for that to happen. Right? Granted, that does require the climate right now to still remain bullish. And we don't know if that's going to happen just yet, but we're leaning more towards that based on some larger time frame scenarios here. So mostly positive, but you still want to be on your toes here today. Be careful just blindly taking longs or honestly taking shorts too. Both are very risky at this point. The best thing to do is just generally wait for confirmation. And to me, a retest of 70,000 would be that confirming factor and seeing how that level holds leading into the Asian market kill zone. It's that AKZ. All right, so those are my thoughts. What are yours? Comment below. Quick heads up to our traders. We got a 15% discount on trading fees if you use my link to register through Bitunix. Links down below in the description. All right, folks, quick look here at Solana, and we can see that obvious rejection here at that 8650 range, this descending trend. So not just the 200 SMA, but we got a descending trend line. There's a lot of volume above the price there. It was a previous wick high as well. So $86 to $87 is kind of that resistance level for Solana. So Solana did pump yesterday, of course. Obviously, we took a short in the $80 range, $79 to $80 range. And then instantly there was that ceasefire agreement for 2 weeks, and then the price goes straight up. So bad luck in a lot of cases, but the concept here is that, generally speaking, when you have a coin that's underperforming so much versus Bitcoin, it's likely to hit that bearish backtest, which it basically just broke right straight through there. Long story short, make sure you pay attention to my invalidation levels. That was, $80 is where you were supposed to close that trade. And that was listed here as well. Invalidation is a 1 hour close above 80. So you shouldn't have held on for long. Good news is we recovered profit there with our previous Ethereum and Bitcoin long positions and our most recent Bitcoin short, 22% so far on that trade. Anyways, I like to bring that up because some folks are like, wait a minute, Cash, you said short was safer. It was, but nobody really knew that we're going to have a ceasefire leading into into that pump yesterday, or inevitably that pump happened because of it. Anyways, long story short, there is this $79 to $80 range, previous resistance, possibly a new support. There's a lot of fair value down there too. Am I proposing we're going to see $80 for Solana right now? Maybe not, but we can see how poorly Solana is behaving versus Bitcoin, and just kind of a true reflection of the market. Generally speaking, most alts are pulling back twice as hard as Bitcoin right now. So if Bitcoin does retrace to 70,000, which I think is a distinct possibility here, then we're going to probably see no less than 80 to 82 for Solana. Okay, it's just best to presume it's going to underperform. Solana's been really bad about pulling back 2x to Bitcoin, and usually only 1x to Bitcoin to the upside. It just so happened to be 2x the Bitcoin on the upside yesterday. It was double, but that was mainly because of just that fury and that fire that came into the market, and just traditional markets and everything just kind of getting on fire. So that's part of it. Anyways, just important to recognize those things. They all factor in. It's unusual for us to see these strong fundamental catalysts, but it happened, and that's just kind of the way it goes. All that said, looking at the liquidation delta tapering off as per usual, still that big chunk of liquidation between 78 and 76. That's what we were targeting yesterday. And at this point, not much liquidation left to the upside. So there's really low incentive for Solana to go much higher. I foresee a bit further downside for Solana. But a common thing to look for and pay attention to is consolidation in this area of 82.50. That was the previous range high. So there's a good chance if the price were to, kind of hang out at the 71K range for Bitcoin, we'll probably see something along these lines here with a bounce or a pivot off that level for Solana. I just don't have a ton of confidence in Solana. This coin is kind of very sporadic and inconsistent lately. Honestly, it's been like that more so since ETF approval, but generally speaking, this downtrend right now has been pretty bad for Solana. So it's going to take a lot more than just one good green day for us to, for me to be bullish in this coin. We got to break this descending trend line for the first part, and we aren't even close to doing that yet. So long story short, closure above $87 would put us in a much better position for bullish continuation to the upside. Maybe see that $100 mark at some point. That will require Bitcoin to go sideways and up, which I don't foresee that happening just yet. So those are my thoughts. What are you thinking? Let me know. Comment below. Love to hear it. Let's take a look at the next one. All right, folks, take a look here at SUI. This is a pretty big pullback here, but a significant fair value gap below the price. As we can see, most altcoins are about 2 to 3x of Bitcoin. This is one of those coins. SUI and Solana and XRP are kind of like the underperformers. At least they were leading into yesterday. And now that they've pumped, the likelihood of pullback is very sensible, considering Bitcoin is going to continue lower too. At least that's the impression I'm getting from Bitcoin for the moment. Okay, now let's take a quick look here at some key levels. We do have potential support here at this 93-cent range. I don't think that's very strong though. That was just an area of confluence in the past. Let's go ahead and actually check the side-by-side and see if there's any correlation here for this coin. So SUI, obviously as per usual, big old green candle, shoots straight up, synonymous with Bitcoin. Now it's pulling back 2x of Bitcoin. It's pretty much par for the course. The areas to watch out for would be this local range here of roughly 90 cents. That was a previous high range, pretty close to that. Just kind of letting us know that a retest there, just like a retest of 70,000, is the most sensible conclusion right now for SUI. The odds of SUI going straight up from here is low, but it's based on Bitcoin. If Bitcoin goes up, then SUI will too. It's going to require that though. And I don't like when coins behave that way. In other words, SUI is moving synonymous with Bitcoin to the upside, but it's 2x to the downside. What does that tell us? That tells us that altcoins are mostly getting hit. Altcoin market dominance is dropping, and there's a reason for that, because alts are first to go, especially when there is a false pump like we saw, and there's still a lot of uncertainty in the world right now. Now, $1 is at heavy resistance. Just keep that in mind for future reference. We have open interest at 90 to 91 cents as far as the delta, or basically the heat map, is concerned, letting us know that's an area of support. Liquidation delta is long to the upside, about 80 million. That's generally favorable. There's not much liquidation to really speak of. 105 to 108 is a safe liquidation range if anybody's shorting right now, just based on the simple fact that it's pretty far away and it's above that key level resistance. So SUI does not have my vote on a long position right now. Seems pretty much conclusive that we're going to go lower, once again, based on the premonition that Bitcoin is going to go lower too, or the premise, right? Having said that, support levels for this coin once more is 90 cents, and alternative, the lower range is about 84 cents. If we do end up breaking 90, I wouldn't say 84 is inevitable, but it's a possibility, okay? For right now, we got to give 90 cents a chance to hold, so either consider a long at that level or a short to that range. Both scenarios are equally as likely. All right. Once more, all depends on what kind of trader you are. Just be careful either way. Make sure you use good risk management and trailing stop losses as soon as you take the trade. All right, let's take a look at the next one. All right, folks, quick look here at XRP, and we're seeing that natural pullback. That local range high of 135, 136 did not hold as support. At least so far, it doesn't look like it wants to. Once more, it does depend on Bitcoin and how well or poorly it does here in the near future. There's a lot of fair value left below the price. Same with Bitcoin at 69,000. So if Bitcoin hits 69K, XRP will hit 131, all right? So that's a decent consideration for a long once fair value gaps have gotten filled. That's usually something I like to lean towards. Right now, I think it's far too early to consider, but once more, a lot of things can change in the climate we're in right now, right? This war is really wreaking havoc on a lot of people. That pump yesterday was unanticipated because nobody knew there was going to be a ceasefire. And once that happened, by the time you got to the charts, the price is already halfway to that upper resistance range. So long story short here, XRP is performing decent versus Bitcoin, but also not so great to the downside. It's roughly 2x to the downside for the moment. So that pullback is pretty sharp, and it's common and consistent with majority of altcoins. All right, so there's nothing special here about XRP, no matter how much you love this coin. All that said, 137, 135, and 130 are those tentative support ranges. Those are synonymous with local highs and local lows. All that said, Liquidation delta still remaining bullish, so keep that in mind. It's not like a bad thing, even though it is tapering off. Of course, we're down at about 300 million, down from 500 million. That still tells us that there's more meat left on the bone, but the bulls are moderately still in control. So once more, inherently more risky to consider shorting this coin. I wouldn't recommend it, especially now that liquidation has been fully swept. Actually, I take that back. The opposite there. It's actually safer to take a short because all liquidation has been swept there in that regard. But that's just one little caveat. That's not something or a reason why you want to take a trade. I don't really love trading situations like this where we have a potential backtest of a support range with fair value below the price. If we continue to close or hold below 135 or at 136 range today, then that would imply further downside makes more sense. But between now and then, I would say it's super risky to consider a trade in either direction, and probably best to wait for Bitcoin to bottom out or to top out. It could very well go higher, right? We don't know that. But fundamentally, just based on the way that things are going right now and that pump, that natural sell-off that should occur as the price pulls back, I think there's a strong chance that XRP goes down with Bitcoin. Those are my thoughts here on the short term. Once more, 24 hours later, tomorrow, it may be a different story, and it definitely will be, actually. So I'm excited to see what that looks like. But between now and then, the best trade is no trade. That's kind of my general recommendation. Either way, quick thank you to my community members for, obviously, being part of my life. Thank you again. If you want to become a better trader, cryptocash.tech is a site, link down below. Otherwise, feel free to direct message me and join us on Twitter and Telegram as well. Really good resources over there for you if you want to ever, consider becoming a bit better of a trader. Once more, it's all there for you, all alpha, and it's always pretty consistent. All right, thanks again for your time. We'll see you in the next one. Have a good rest of your day.